All right, everybody. This is the chapter one presentation that I'm going to be doing for you guys. So you have some PowerPoints at your disposal, and I have taken those PowerPoints and added a couple of things just for some enhanced learning. So without further ado, I will get started. Again, my name is Audrey Zatopek, and I have a Master of Arts in Counseling. And I am a licensed professional counselor as well as licensed chemical dependency counselor in the state of Texas. So I have been living, breathing, working with the concepts of this human development class since I started school pretty much in 2013, my master's degree, and then working with it more so since I started having licensure in 2016. So I'm going to get into this stuff, and I hope that this is helpful for your learning. So this is on chapter one. So learning objectives, explaining the role of developmental science and problem-solving processes of reflective practitioners. 1.2, identify distinguishing characteristics, core issues of classic theoretical approaches in developmental science, particularly the stage and incremental theories. Explaining how and why contemporary multidimensional developmental theories synthesize the extreme positions of classic theorists, assessing advantages, disadvantages of using multidimensional approaches, and identifying three core developmental issues and contrasting current research-based conclusions with classic assumptions on each core issue. So reflection and action. Reflective practice considers theoretical and empirical sources of knowledge and one's own beliefs and assumptions. So if you're struggling to remember what exactly reflective practice is, just think about it as you reflect when you practice, right? So you are reflecting on theory, you are reflecting on empirically backed things. You're reflecting on, what do I think? What do I feel? What are my biases? What are my beliefs? What is my knowledge base, right? So practice that is reflective in nature. Now there is a gap between science and practice. There are cases that are very complex, which once you guys get to practicum stage, you will definitely start to see. I may be biased in saying it, but I think every practitioner should work in a psychiatric hospital at least once in their career, just because you can get a great wealth of knowledge from the exposure to great acuity of mental health problems that exist. So schizophrenia, catatonia, personality disorders, self-harm issues, hallucinations, paranoia, OCD, CPS cases can often be something that fall in your lap if you're working on adolescent unit. You can learn a lot, but yes, cases are complex, sometimes ill-defined, and do not follow scientific principles. So you want to combine mastery of knowledge and your skills base with your personal hypotheses in generating your approach to research and in testing hypotheses that you come up with. In terms of sequence, you first apply standard rules, facts, and then you reason from these rules to your specific problem, and then you test new approaches after that has happened. So you begin by examining your own beliefs about development. So a historical perspective on developmental theory. So Charles Darwin's theory of evolution in the 19th century prompted interest in children's development. He did a baby biography detailing the changes in his own son's development as a method of examining that. And then academic departments devoted to child study emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries. And then classic developmental theories emerged in the 20th century. And lastly, contemporary theories integrate classic theories and other disciplines. So classic stage theories, they view development as a qualitative change, like a staircase, right? A qualitative quality change, right? Characteristics changing, developing. There is stability within stages and sometimes rapid transition between stages, pending that someone or a child, a baby, doesn't have any intellectual developmental issues preventing progression up the staircase, as you will. So Freud's theories, the personality theory involving three aspects of personality development, the id, ego, and superego. And then you also have his psychosocial or biological stages of development involving the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. These stages are based on an infant's drive to satisfy strong needs at each stage. And don't worry, I kind of ran through those because I have some images for you. So fun fact about any concept, if you're ever struggling with it, a cheat method that I guess it's cheat method that I use to learn things is I'll just Google psychoanalysis, or I'll Google id, ego, superego, and then click images and see if there's some kind of model or graphic that can better help you understand whatever it is you're struggling to understand. And so that's actually how I found this iceberg. And so you can see that the ego, superego, and id are on different levels of consciousness. So the conscious level is your ego. And this is your executive mediating between the id impulses and superego inhibitions. You're testing reality. It's the very rational part of the self. It operates mainly at the conscious level, but it can also be somewhat at the pre-conscious level. Now, on the pre-conscious level, you've got the superego. This is where you've got ideals, morals, you're striving for perfection here. It's incorporated from your parents. So learning from your parents how you should or should not be, becoming your person's conscience. And this is a mostly pre-conscious level of functioning. And then you've got the id. And this is where at your unconscious level, you have basic impulses that are being managed: sex and aggression, seeking immediate gratification or impulsivity. Irrationality can also be part of that. And it's at an unconscious level, as I mentioned. Now, the psychosexual stages of personality development, as mentioned, the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. And I already mentioned, how you can find these things with ease, but I'm also a very visual person, visual learner. I love charts and things being really organized, even looking at research. If there's not a chart where these statistics are organized, it can be kind of hard to follow a research article that you're reading. So I love helping people learn with charts as well. So for the oral stage, 0 to 1 years, the erogenous zone is the mouth. So they're learning by means of the mouth, perhaps. Issues that are caused if a person should be focused on that oral stage: smoking, gum chewing, nail biting, etc. These are issues thought to be caused by fixation of the infant during that stage. Complex is not applicable there, and activities involved in the oral stage are tasting and sucking. And you'll see that babies love putting everything in their mouth. And so if you think about it, babies are born blank slates. They don't know anything about anything. They've never seen a water bottle. They've never seen a glasses case. They've never seen a computer mouse or a composition journal or a cell phone or anything. So they don't know what anything is. And so their main form of learning is mouth, right? What does this taste like? What does it feel like? What does it do? What is it like? And actually, fun fact, if you didn't know it, babies are born relatively blind. And I think it's around 7 to 8 months when their vision really starts to be clear. So if you ever are around a baby and you notice them staring at the corners of rooms or really dark or bright, distinguishable colors from the surroundings, it's because that's what they can see the best. But yeah, so that's the oral stage. Anal stage, 2 to 3 years, the erogenous zone, bowel and bladder, issues caused due to fixation on the anal stage: rigidity, orderliness, obsessiveness. There's not a complex associated. And then activities of the anal stage include peeing, pooping, and potty training begins. As for the phallic stage, age 3 to 6, the genitals are the erogenous zone. So you might see children start playing with themselves, not in a masturbation sense, but just because they're having awareness there. And issues caused due to fixation could include pride, vanity, and exhibitionism, which is showing yourself to people. And then complexes associated with the phallic stage are the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex. Now, you guys may or may not have heard of these before. If you're a psychology major in undergrad, you probably did, or even sociology probably. But the Oedipus complex is when a child, a male child, has a internal, external struggle with dad competing for mom's love and attention. And the Electra complex, as the opposite, if you will, is when a female child has that same process with the father. And so it's a battle of the child versus the parent. They're struggling with understanding that I'm just a child and I'm not my parent's partner, right? And so activities associated with it, there could be excessive attachment to the parent of the opposite sex, potentially that takes place as in those complexes. So you want to be mindful of that and setting boundaries with children. And then the latency stage, the age bracket there is 6 years and onward up until puberty. The erogenous zone, there is not one, but sexual feelings are inactive. There's not any issues related to fixation in this particular chart. And then complexes that can occur include penis envy, which I'm going to remind myself of what that is because I can't recall. It's escaping me in this very moment. But what I'm remembering, I believe, is that penis envy has to do with that. Okay, excuse me. No, yeah, that's actually what I thought it was. So it's a longing that young people assigned female at birth may experience when they realize they don't have a penis. So that can happen with female children. And that's just something to be mindful of, is that it can happen. There can be that jealousy that they don't have that. And then most of the time is spent in interacting with peer and role models of the same sex. And so there's learning from your same sex that occurs there. And then the last stage is genital, and this has to do with puberty and onwards, the erogenous zone, matured sexual interests, may involve oral sex, actual sex, exploring the body of your own gender or the opposite. And then in this stage, sexual attractions begin. And continuing on, I use this on the reg in my work, Erikson's personality theory with the stages of man, the psychosocial stages of development. I use this very often. And so you've got trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus skill, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, ego integrity versus despair. And you could probably guess it. I have a chart. Here it is. And so infancy, 0 to 18 months. So you're seeing your basic conflict. Conflict is trust versus mistrust. Can I trust my caregiver or not? And the important events that help with development of trust involve feeding and comfort, right? So am I being held when I'm crying, or am I being abandoned in my crib to cry for 4 hours straight and no one comes to soothe me, right? Can I trust my caregiver to come take care of me if I'm not okay? And feeding is a basic need, you know, as you know, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic need of food, shelter, water, safety. If I can't trust you to keep me not hungry, then I don't trust you, right? And so a key question that is answered in this stage is my world safe? And the outcome, ideally, is that children will develop a sense of trust when their caregivers provide reliability, care, and affection. And a lack of those things will lead to mistrust. Early childhood, age 2 to 3. The conflict are two different directions it can go in this phase are autonomy versus shame and doubt. So autonomy, what is that? I can do things on my own. I can be my own person. Or are you going to have shame and doubt that you can't do it yourself? I can't. And I can even remember the important events, toilet training, dressing. I remember being a very small child and yelling to my mom when I went to the bathroom, "Mom, I need to be wiped." And I needed to know there was trust in my caregiver to come take care of something I didn't yet have autonomy about, right, during potty training. So key questions to be answered. Can I do things by myself, or need I always rely on others? And so fortunately for me, my mom didn't. I'm 30 years old now. I'm not getting wiped anymore, if anyone's curious. My mom empowered me that I could do it myself. And eventually it was something I gained confidence I could do myself, to where now I'm 30 years old and I don't need assistance in the restroom. So outcomes, children need to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence. Success leads to feelings of autonomy, and failure in this stage can result in feelings of shame and doubt about that. Okay, so preschool stage, 3 to 5, initiative versus guilt. So am I capable of starting things myself? Can I have success? Can I initiate things? Or do I develop guilt about being ineffective or having perhaps no self-efficacy, right? I can't do stuff, right? And I have insecurity about that. Important events here involve exploration and play. And the key question to be answered, am I good or am I bad? The outcome here, children need to begin asserting control and power over the environment. Success in this state leads to a sense of purpose. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. Okay, school age 6 to 11, industry versus inferiority. Can I be successful in accomplishing things or am I incapable, right? Important events involve school and activities. And the key question to be answered, how can I be good? How can I be successful? And in terms of outcomes, children need to cope with new social and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feelings of inferiority. Am I a competent person that I can enter into things and be successful or not? Okay, next stage, adolescence, 12 to 18. So identity versus role confusion. My, oh my, do I see adolescents come into therapy because this stage of development is so hard to sometimes navigate for teenagers. So important events involve social relationships and identity. Key questions to be answered, who am I and where am I going, right? So when I graduate high school, what am I going to do with my life? I have no idea. While I'm in high school, what am I doing? Where am I? Where do I belong? Am I a band person? Am I an athlete? Am I part of the emo crowd? Am I on the theater arts club, or am I in the theater arts club? Am I doing student government? Am I in the American Red Cross Club? Am I homeschooled? And maybe my group is a volleyball team that I do at a club volleyball place. Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Right. And so teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. And that can come from the media, that can come from social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even dating apps can have an impact on socialization, because how do people talk about themselves in their profile might impact how they put things about themselves in a profile that they might develop or create. And so success in developing an identity leads to staying true to oneself, knowing who oneself is and having confidence in that, owning that. I know who I am. I am a Southern Baptist Christian and volleyball is my sport, and being in the orchestra is really important, playing the violin. Or my identity is I'm a football player and I'm Muslim, and going to mosque is really important to me every week, and making sure I do my sunrise prayers. And it's also really important to me to be student body president, right? Or maybe my identity is I am from a large family that is atheist, and it's really important to me that I identify my own interests and I'm my own person. I don't know what I want to do yet, but that's okay. It's normalized. And it's really important to prepare to go to college and be on the honor roll. I don't know, right? So these are all different kinds of identities that people can have. And that can be either completely clear through this adolescent stage, or you can leave the adolescent stage very confused. And that can definitely lead to addiction issues, because there's anxiety, depression, concern for, I don't know who I am. Where am I going with my life? I've got no idea. And so you can see addiction problems that come out of that. You can see anxiety, depression. You might even see people joining gangs because they're looking for identity. They're looking for belonging because they don't feel like they belong anywhere. And so they might join somewhere that does accept them regardless of how they are, a gang, right? Which could lead to an increased life of crime and end them up on probation. As I've worked with a number of people that their problem started when they were a teenager. Mom and dad weren't around to help them identify who am I, how am I, where am I, and why am I? So parents can play a big role in this identity. Peers can play a big role. Teachers, church leaders, mosque leaders, religious leaders. Even people that are just in the media, right? Do you watch Fox News or CNN all day long? That can influence how you develop as a political person, if at all. Maybe you become apolitical because it turns you off so much. I know the world we're in right now, it's an ugly place, but yes, adolescence. This is a huge, huge, huge stage that can definitely lead to a lot of neurosis later in adolescence, or even as an adult. It can last a very long time, because I've seen adults in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they still don't feel like they belong anywhere, and they're looking for it. And you can see that they're still kind of stuck there in the immaturity that they show in their life and the way they live it. So this very much is a visible thing in your practice. You'll see once you get there. The next stage, young adult stage, 19 to 40. So intimacy versus isolation. Important events include intimate relationships. So key question there, am I loved and wanted? So do you experience intimacy? Do you develop closeness with another person? Do you develop a romantic relationship with others? Or are you able to do that or not? Or do you find yourself isolated, right? Do you find yourself unable to establish intimate relationships and you're alone? You're not necessarily an introvert, but you find yourself alone, or you try to connect, but you don't feel that you can. And so you feel isolated, even if you're in a room full of people, you just don't feel like you know how or can. And so young adults need to form intimate, loving relationships with other people. It's on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once again, love and belonging. And success in this stage leads to strong relationships, while failure results in loneliness and isolation. And again, I see a lot of people in that age range, 19 to 40, they're coming to therapy because they're isolated or they're struggling with intimacy issues. They don't know how to deal with this current relationship. I'm not feeling love. My partner cheated and they keep cheating. I don't know why. I keep forgiving. Or, I'm married and I'm unhappy and I want someone new. Or I've even had one patient came in with 3 boyfriends and didn't know which one to break up with. They've got intimacy skills, but they're maybe abusing them, or not being completely transparent with others, and it's causing distress because they're trying to live 3 lives at the same time. So am I loved and wanted? And you could also see that question, am I loved and wanted, could be something that fuels a number of personality disorders, right? If I from childhood felt shame and doubt and felt guilt, inferiority, might have some role confusion, and I'm feeling isolation, whether that started early or progressively happened. So, the borderline personality is constantly testing that boundary. Am I loved and wanted? I'm going to attention seek to see if I can get someone to show me that they do love me, because I'm not sure if they do or not. I don't know if I even love myself. Right. So you can see personality disorders developing with these things not developing correctly. And you can see how these stages not going in the healthy direction can contribute to someone eventually coming into therapy because the results or the consequences of them not being successful. The next one, middle adulthood, 40 to 65. Basic conflict there is generativity versus stagnation. Important events involve work and parenthood. Key question, will I provide something of real value? So during this stage, am I generating something good? Am I adding to the world in a positive way? Or am I just existing and doing nothing, and I'm stagnant and I'm not doing anything really that great? I'm just kind of here, right? So adults need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, kind of like a legacy, right? Often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to feelings of usefulness and accomplishment. So I feel like I've generated something good for the world, versus failure results in shallow involvement in the world. And I feel like I didn't do much, and it can cause depression. It can cause anxiety, which can lend to the next stage. And you can see people in these later stages of life coming to therapy because I just don't feel like I did anything with my life. I feel like I could have done more, but I didn't. And so you can see this depression, anxiety related to aging, related to lack of productivity, generativity in a person's life. And they're coming to you to find out how they can better do that, so they're not ending their life feeling inadequate in some way. And then the last stage is maturity, 65 to death. And the basic conflict here is ego, identity versus despair. Important event, you're reflecting on life and you're questioning, have I lived a full life? Did I do anything that was worthwhile? Am I happy with the way that I did things? right? And I often, even if patients are only in the adolescent, young adult, or middle adulthood stage, I will often throw out a imagery exercise. Okay, close your eyes, and maybe you can do this with me right now if you'd like. Close your eyes, and I want you to imagine yourself, you're 85 years old, and you're sitting on the porch of a house with a wraparound porch, watching the sunset, and you're sitting in a rocking chair, just rocking back and forth. And you're reflecting back on your life, and you're reflecting on the way that you've been living it and the way that you've lived it. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm so glad that I did the things I did. I don't have any regrets. Now snap back to the present moment. Are you living your life in a way where you could be that 85-year-old sitting in that rocking chair saying, yeah, I'm glad I did what I did? And if the answer is maybe not, maybe it's time you start examining, okay, what are things I'd like to achieve by that point that I'm not doing? What are steps I can take to start working towards being that happy 85-year-old on the porch, right? And so you can utilize these stages to look at, okay, once you get to this ego identity versus despair stage, you may only be 40 right now, but I want you to get to that stage and have ego identity. I want to help you live your life in a way where you're proud of the life that you've lived. You're happy you did it the way that you did it, right? So this model can be used for understanding people. It can be used for helping people be reflective and live their lives in healthy ways, or in ways that align with their morals, values, goals, or in helping them identify new morals, values, and goals if they don't have any. And also the last thing to say, the outcome there. So older adults need to look back on life and feel a sense of fulfillment. Success at this stage leads to a feeling of wisdom, while failure results in regret, bitterness, and despair. And something else I wanted to mention is that with people with addictive issues, substance use disorders, you can sometimes see a regression in the psychosocial stages of change. So perhaps somebody is 40, but they're acting like they're 15. They're having issues fitting in. They're having issues with friends. They're having issues with who am I? Identity. I don't know who I am. I've been drunk for so long. I don't know. Right. And so it can be a regression, or it can be what's called stunted maturation, where someone doesn't proceed past something because of substance use. So maybe if I start using drugs and alcohol at the age of 15, I might be 40 years old, but I never stopped using. I might be stuck at the maturity of a 15-year-old, right? So these stages are useful for not only understanding the human, but also for understanding people that are going to come into your counseling office for real. It's not just something you're being tested on. It's something you're really going to see in your office in front of you, alive and breathing. Okay, so Piaget's cognitive development theory. So he's got stages of cognitive development: the sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stages. And then you guys guessed it, I have a chart on the next slide. But the constructivist view of development: children actively build their knowledge. Adults provide learning experiences and allow children to explore. They construct their development. They construct their reality, who they are, the way that they think about things through exposure to things, right? Like, I understand that you don't touch fire because you burned your finger on it. You understand that, right? I remember I definitely learned the don't lick things that are frozen rule when I was, how old was I? I think I was like 9, and we had this freezer that would frost over, and I'd seen that movie Christmas Story, if anyone else has seen it, where they dare the kid to lick the telephone pole in the middle of the blizzard. And they're like, oh, don't worry, it won't stick. And he's out there, and they have to call the fire department to get his tongue off the pole. Well, I licked a metal shelf in my freezer, and we had to use hot water to get my tongue off. Fortunately, I didn't rip anything off or anything, but I learned. My mom didn't tell me to do that, so she didn't necessarily provide that experience. She wasn't maybe providing the supervision I needed at the moment. But through my experience, I learned you don't lick that stuff, right? And like I was talking about babies earlier, they're learning about what stuff is and isn't. They're using their mouths. Children learn through exposure. Like, what is mud? They like touching things and trying things on. They're figuring out makeup because they put it all over their face. They don't know how a toilet works, so they fill it up with toilet paper and flush it to see what happens because they don't know, right? Or they color on the wall because, oh, wow, wow, this can do that. I didn't know that. That's so neat. They keep going. How long will this go for? Does the whole wall do this? Wow, right? So they're exploring their environment. They're constructing their view through experiences. So Piaget's stages of cognitive development, and I have a second slide after this that kind of goes over these same things, but with different language, just because, hey, why not? You want to see different ways of things so you can understand them. So the sensory motor stage is ages 0 to 2 for cognitive development. So what happens during this stage? You're coordinating your senses with your motor responses, right? So when you toss with one hand, you catch with the other, right? You're coordinating, things go together. You have sensory curiosity about the world. What does it taste? What does it smell? What does that sound? What does it feel like? Language is used for demands in cataloging, and object permanence is developed. So what is stuff, right? Understanding what things are. The pre-operational stage is stages 2 to 7. In this stage, you've got symbolic thinking, use of proper syntax and grammar to express concepts. You see kids starting to form sentences and understand how they work. Imagination and intuition are strong, but complex abstract thoughts are still difficult, and conservation is developed, which means if I don't look at it, I know it's still there, right? So I'm going to leave my drink right here. I'm going to leave the room, and I know when I leave the room, it's still right there. Okay, yeah, right. Conservation. And something interesting to know with children that are learning to use proper syntax and grammar, you don't want to say, no, 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 don't do it that way. That you'd rather, as a form of correction, just speak it back to them with the correct syntax and grammar to help them learn how to say it, instead of shaming, no, 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 bad, bad, bad. You just, doggy hungry. Oh, the doggy is hungry. I want snack. Oh, you would like a snack, right? So you can just repeat back the way that it would be properly said. Concrete operational stage, age range 7 to 11 years old. What happens is concepts are attached to concrete situations. Time, space, and quantity are understood and can be applied, but not as independent concepts necessarily. And then finally, in the formal operational stage, 11 years and older, what happens is theoretical, hypothetical, and counterfactual thinking. Abstract logic and reasoning starts taking place. Strategy and planning become possible. Concepts learned in one context can be applied to another, so they can draw conclusions about things and think abstractly and pros and cons. What would happen if, right? So they're able to think more in that way. So that's why you see children doing a lot of things. Oh, no, no, no. Don't do that. Oh, don't do that. I don't realize if they walk off the edge of a table, it's going to hurt when they hit their head on the floor. That operational thinking happens around age 11 and older. So following that up with another chart, just to add more examples of how these different stages are characterized. Sensory motor, you differentiate yourself from objects. You recognize yourself as an agent of action and begin to act with intention, like you pull a string to set a mobile in motion, like the mobile above a baby's bed, or you shake a rattle to make a noise because you know it does that, right? You also achieve object permanence, so you realize things continue to exist when no longer present to the sense. Pace, Bishop, Berkeley. So pre-operational stage, other examples, you learn to use language and to represent objects by images and words. Thinking is still egocentric. You have difficulty taking the viewpoint of others. So being empathetic, like it's going to hurt somebody else's feelings if you say or do something. You're just thinking about what you want, what the self wants. And you classify objects by using a single feature. So you might group together all the red blocks regardless of their shape, or all the square blocks regardless of their color, so you understand categorization of things. Concrete operational is characterized by logically thinking about objects and events. You achieve conservation of number at age 6, mass at age 7, and weight at age 9, if you're following a normative development. And you classify objects according to several features and can order them in a series along a single dimension like size. As for formal operational, you can think logically about abstract propositions and test hypotheses systematically, right? So you can run your little research studies if you want. You become concerned with the hypothetical, the future, and ideological problems. And I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but there's a link at the bottom of each of these images where you can find these images if you want. But like I said before, you can just Google Piaget's cognitive development model and you'll get a bunch of images. Emphasizing continuity. So incremental change. Development is a continuous process. So there's an incremental slope. Now, interestingly, as I mentioned before, while it says it's a continuous process, there can be regression where you slide back down the hill and then you go back up, right? That age regression that can happen as a result of addiction or as a result of other cognitive impairments. Traumatic brain injury can cause that. But learning theories are in the behaviorist tradition. Behavior changes based on environmental events like classical conditioning, operant conditioning, reinforcement, which these are things that you would see very much in applied behavioral analysis, ABA therapy, often used with children diagnosed on the autism spectrum with an autism spectrum disorder. Social learning theories focus on social skills and personality. Emphasis on modeling or observational learning. So social learning, you learn socially, you learn from the social environment. I see how other people, oh, that's how you use a cell phone. Okay, that's how I'm gonna do it too. Oh, that's how you apply chapstick. Oh, I'm gonna try that, right? So interesting, an example of this, you can see, like I said, the kids that put their parents' makeup on their face, usually they put it in generally the right spot. They just did a pretty crappy job, right? So the lipstick is all over their face because they've been seeing mommy put it in that area. And the eyeshadow's all over up here because they've been seeing mommy put it there. Or they put the eyebrows all over the forehead because they've been seeing mommy put that right there. Or you see they put the blush, it's like all over the whole cheek because that's how they've seen their parent put it on, right? So that's that modeling, or they observed it and that's how they learned to do it. Same thing with how one dresses. They put the parents' high heels on, right? You see the little kid wearing the high heels because the parent wears the high heels. So information processing theories compare cognitive functioning to computer processing of information. So incremental changes happen in many domains of thought and skill. So classic theories and the major issues they raise. So is developmental change qualitative, where there's stages like a staircase? Or is it quantitative, where it's incremental, like a slope? Case can be made for both, right? Progressively making change quantitative, there's a slope, you just gradually increase. Or is there a step and a stage and a jump that is made, right? Now I'm thinking about chapstick because I did that example, but a little bit on. The case can be made for both. I've seen regression in the staircase-like model of someone's mental health where there's decline, where, they're doing really good and maybe somebody diagnosed with bipolar disorder stops taking their meds, they come back the next week, they're back 5 steps, having an extreme mania swing and hyperactive, not sleeping, just blew 15 grand on a boat, and they're not doing okay. They had stair steps backwards, or you could even say they slipped backwards. Right. So, I think in a way it's kind of preference of conceptualization. How do you prefer to look at it? But I think both of them are very valid. And then, do some developments occur only in critical periods of life? What could that mean? Some developments occur only in critical periods of life, right? Can I only find identity during my adolescent stage? I would argue no, right? But if you were to strictly say, oh, you can only have identity or role confusion in the adolescent phase and you're stuck with whatever you get. Is that true? I don't think so. Maybe you think differently, but right, you reflect on that a little bit more. And just in the fact that I have worked with a lot of people in counseling that come to me without an identity in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and I help them define what that is. They join a knitting circle or I had a guy that joined a crocheting circle. He loves it. Had patients get more involved in their churches, had them get more involved if they're an alcoholic in recovery, becoming a sponsor and working with sponsees, or maybe they want to help with a smart recovery group or whatever. So I don't agree that if it doesn't occur, it can only occur in that phase, but maybe there's other stages you can think of that maybe it would have to only be in that one particular one. Something to think about. Oh, and just backing up a little bit, I just thought of something else I want to say about the psychosocial stages. That this just came to mind. I've not read this anywhere, but it's something interesting to think about. What if somebody has a diagnosis where they only have so many months to live? You think that might speed up what stage they might feel like they're at? They might jump down to ego, identity, and despair real quick. Have I lived a full life? I'm only 35. What have I done? And so they might be living the remainder of these questions without having even gone through them yet, because they've been given a diagnosis that they don't have much longer to live. Right? So you see, this is a huge thing. Like I said, I use this almost every week, maybe even almost every day working with clients. I see issues stemming from these stages not being properly gone through, or maybe they're being forced into it, or they don't understand how to get through. So next question, are there continuities across the lifespan, or is development in flux? Are there certain things that are continuous, or is it ebbing and flowing? Okay. Are people actively influencing the course and nature of their own development? I would say absolutely yes, in one sense, in terms of they choose where they do and don't go, who they do and don't spend their time around, how they do and don't take care of their bodies, what knowledge they do and don't expose themselves to, whether they do or don't read, right? Do you allow yourself to go to treatment and be analyzed and work through issues, or work on improving upon yourself or being your best person? Do you openly receive feedback from others about how you can improve upon yourself? Or are you rigid and stuck and defiant and don't care to hear what other people have to say, and you're good and you know, right? That's going to affect your development. Absolutely. Because if you got the iron wall of Audrey, or if I've got the iron wall of Audrey around me, I don't let anything in, I'm going to remain who I am, other than maybe what conclusions I draw for myself. But if I allow myself to be exposed to others, learn from others, absorb from others, I might grow in a different way, right? Like if I never was a research assistant in a PTSD lab at the University of Texas at Austin, Hook'em, so I did my undergrad, I never would have been exposed to a Master of Arts in Counseling. One of my research assistant people that was over me, the, what do you call him? I guess a supervisor or the research assistant or whatever his title was. He had an LPC, and I was like, what's that? I'm a senior. I was in my second semester of my senior year. I had no idea what I was doing after college, a psych major. And he's like, oh, it's licensed professional counselor. And I learned from him what that was. And I allowed his background to influence the direction of my development. And I applied to a program, Houston Graduate School of Theology. They had late application until June, I think, to be able to start in August. And it worked out great. I got in and I started becoming a counselor because I was willing to let another influence my course and my development. Right? So next question, which is more important, nature or nurture? Ooh, age-old question, centuries-old question. Maybe even thousands of years. I don't know how long that's been asked, but long time for sure. Definitely Piaget and Freud and Charcot, these different psychology folks, lots of question about which one is more important, which one is more powerful. Arguably, I think they're both extremely important, because absolutely you've got biopsychosocial factors that contribute to the development of addictions or addictions or mental health issues. So biopsychosocial, big word, y'all may have heard of it, may have not, but breaking it down, I didn't think of this until this moment. I would have put a slide on here about it. But biopsychosocial, you can break it down in this way. Actually, you know what? I will grab my dry erase board. That's the way that I can do this. See how I do my job with my clients here. So, biopsychosocial. What is that? So biopsychosocial factors, and hopefully it's backwards on my camera. I hope it's not on yours. So biopsychosocial factors, what are those? So it's easy when you break the word down. So bio, what is bio? Biology. So biological factors that contribute to the development of addiction or mental health issues. So do you have a serotonin production issue? Do you have hypersensitive dopamine receptors that make you more prone to developing an addiction because you get a heightened sense of pleasure. So people sometimes say, oh, alcoholism's in my family, I'm gonna be an alcoholic too. That's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily like you're gonna be an alcoholic or you've got an addictive personality per se. It's actually shown that it's that dopamine receptor that you can inherit from your parents, that you've got a more sensitive dopamine receptor in your brain where you get more pleasure from alcohol or drugs or pleasure-seeking activities, pleasurable activities than the average bird, if you will. So you are more prone to developing an addiction because you get that heightened sense of pleasure. So biological factors, and it could be even health issues. You have heart disease, you have a chronic illness, you have chronic pain. What are biological bodily things that might be contributing or do contribute to depression, anxiety, or addiction developing, right? If I've got chronic back pain, that's a pretty good reason for somebody to want to drink, right? I don't want my back to hurt when I go to sleep at night. I want to sleep. Psycho. What is that? Psychological, right? Do I have a way of thinking that lends to my anxiety, my depression, my unhealthiness, right? And fun fact, sidebar, completely, well, not completely irrelevant, but psychopath versus sociopath, psychopathy versus sociopathy. What is the difference? Just a little sidebar, not really relevant to this class, but psycho versus socio. What is the difference between those terms? Psychological versus sociological. So the psychopath is someone that is born without the ability to feel empathy, versus the sociopath is someone that is socialized to have no empathy, as in the case of a child that grows up in a gang, right? Potentially, not every person that is in a gang is a sociopath, to be clear, but you could grow up in a gang environment where there is no empathy among the members of the gang, and so the child perhaps learns not to have any either. So there's psychological factors. So getting off that subject, interesting subject. Psychological factors contribute to development, anxiety, depression, and addiction issues. And then lastly, you've got social here. What is that? That one's pretty straightforward. What is the socialization that you are exposed to in your environments that contributes to who and how you are, right? What school do you go to? Do you have to go through a metal detector to get to your English class in the morning and show your ID to a police officer? Or do you go to a private school where everybody's wearing ties and navy and fancy shoes, and their parents, all the kids drive Audis and Range Rovers? Those environments have a difference and different impact on the child, perhaps, right? Or do you live in a home that's got 3 security alarms and you have a security gate to your neighborhood? Or do you live in a neighborhood where there's bars on your window and there's shootings every weekend, and you can't walk to the store by yourself because you might get jumped? Nature versus nurture. You know, based on the biopsychosocial factors, right? You would, I mean, for me, it's almost like they're even kiltered, right? I mean, depending on the nature that you're exposed to and the nurture you're exposed to, one could have more impact, but they're equally important in my book. But others might disagree or have different opinions. And then is development universal across cultures and history? So whether I'm a baby in India or I'm a baby in Canada, is my cognitive development, my psychosocial development the same? Is it different? And I can't answer that question because I haven't studied that, so I'm not really sure, but that'd be something interesting to know. So contemporary multidimensional systems theories, modern developmental theories. Systems theories explain interrelated causal processes, bidirectional processes at work, reciprocal causes, consider both qualitative and quantitative changes, and they vary in which aspects of development they emphasize. They include transactional, relational, biosocial, ecological theory, lifespan developmental theory, and more. Bronfenbrenner's bioecological theory views developments as function of proximal processes, reciprocal interactions between the individual and persons, objects, symbols in the immediate external environment, modified by distal processes, some within the individual, others outside the immediate environment. Nested levels of environment that influence development are the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. The microsystem is your immediate environment, family, school, neighbors. Mesosystem is a set of relationships among microsystems. Exosystem influences children, may not directly interact with that. And then the macrosystem involves customs, attitudes, laws, and such that shape microsystems. And then another layer of Bronfenbrenner's biological theory is the chronosystem. It adds a useful dimension of time, and it demonstrates the influence of change and constancy in children's environments. It may include a change in the family structure, address, parents' employment status, as well as immense society changes such as economic cycles and wars. You guessed it, a graphic. So Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, I just think that this helps you understand what are the layers and levels of this: immediate, connections, indirect, social and cultural, and then changes over time. Multi-layered system, right? Applications, this comes from Psychology Notes headquarters article on what is it. So through various ecological systems, Bronfenbrenner's theory demonstrates the diversity of interrelated influences on child development. Awareness of the context that children are in can sensitize us to variations in the way children may act in different settings. So if I'm aware of all these layers of a child's experience, I might be more understanding of why they might act certain ways in certain places, right? Why they might act a certain way at school versus at home, at the store versus with their friends, right? For example, a child who frequently bullies smaller children at school may portray the role of a terrified victim at home. Due to these variations, adults who are concerned with the care of a particular child should pay close attention to his or her behavior in different settings, as well as to the quality and type of connections that exist between these settings. Lifespan developmental theory is belief that developmental processes continue throughout life. Being alive means developmental change is occurring. Adaptation continues from the conception to death. So we are adapting throughout our lives to the different things, the punches and the dives and the dips, dodge, dive, duck, dip, dive, dodge, name that movie, Dodgeball. You roll through life and you're adapting from the time you are born to the time that you die to everything that is around you, because what does the brain want to do? What does the body want to do? Naturally, it wants to survive. So it's as a survival mechanism, we adapt. And that's part of sidebar for counseling implications. If you are in a traumatic environment for long enough, it becomes normal. You adapt to it as a means to survive it because it doesn't get any better. If I'm crying every single day and I'm in a trauma setting, how much am I going to be able to protect myself from things that come my way? Not very well. And so you adapt, right? Interacting web of influences on development, architecture of biological and cultural supports. Biological supports benefit successful adaptation in childhood, and successful adaptation depends on cultural supports in adulthood. So support or lack thereof can affect your development. A new look at 3 developmental issues, and then we're going to get to some questions here in just a second. We're almost there. Both nature and nurture influence most behavioral outcomes. Developmental research provides evidence of influence of both. Modern multidimensional view shows that heredity and environment are dependent upon each other. Inter means between. So neuroplasticity in critical sensitive periods, brain and its function are not static. Changes are continuous. Time-dependent, region-specific windows of opportunity for rapid neural reorganization exist alongside continuing plasticity. And lastly, universality and specificity, the role of culture. Recognize the importance of context. Is your client in a loving, comforting, supportive environment, or is our mom and dad gone all the time and they're alone and they're raising themselves? And their only source of learning is the TV. And all they watch is cops. I mean, you think about the direction a child's life might go if all they ever watch is cops, or all they ever watch is hoarders, or all they ever watch is cartoons, or all they ever watch is the Discovery Channel, right? You might see that child that's been abandoned and neglected not develop very much empathy, perhaps, right? It might become sociopath. They have no empathy because no one's around. So context is important. Applications, use of research-based knowledge helps protect practitioners. It also protects you from lawsuits. Developmental approach helps personalize care with emphasis on individual and cultural differences. Reflective practitioner, the practitioner that is reflective integrates research and practice. And when you get started, it may feel very alien or uncomfortable, but it gets more comfortable with time because you read what works, you practice what works, and it becomes like second nature. You can switch between theories like that just based on what someone says or is doing in front of you. So you guys will get more confident as you go. And lastly, translational research brings lab science to practical implementation in many fields. Rules of thumb for helpers: categorize types of prevention as universal, selective, and indicated, which is differentiated from treatment. and choose options to employ for prevention and treatment. Understand why science is helpful. Use empirically based prevention and treatment. Don't get lawsuits that way. Better again. And you also document that you're using them. Be an informed consumer of information about a program of practice. Use peer-reviewed publications and follow ethical guidelines in conducting and reporting research. Right, Belmont report. And lastly, focus on developmental psychopathology. Perspective on dysfunctional behavior integrates work from many disciplines, guided by multidimensional or systems theories of development. There's a view of protective factors and risk factors, effects of the individual strengths, vulnerabilities, environmental influences, axiomatic principles, multifinality. There's a range of possible outcomes, right? Multiple outcomes potentially. And then equifinality is where there's different pathways to similar outcomes. And the goals with developmental psychopathology, there's a greater prediction and prevention of problematic outcomes. So that is the end of the PowerPoint provided by the book. And so I've posed some questions here at the end just to give you guys some questions for contemplation that may or may not be on future testing. So question number 1, theories of development differ from opinion primarily because A, B, C, or D? C, they are based on scientific research. Next question, Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory is based on stages of reasoning and understanding ability, cognition. Which stage describes the cognition of children during most of their years of schooling from elementary through middle school, typically ages 7 through 12? A, B, C, or D? B, concrete operational. Using Erikson's developmental theory as a framework, which of the following statements is an accurate representation of his ideas? Is it A, an individual cannot progress to a later stage unless earlier stage has been resolved successfully and completely? B, successful progression through the stages of development depends upon effective resolution of the Oedipal crisis. C, successful resolution of a psychosocial crisis at each stage depends upon having more positive than negative experiences in the area of major concern. Or D, highly intelligent individuals can skip specific stages and make progress at a faster rate than other people. A, B, C, or D? C. In Bronfenbrenner's multidimensional model of development, what aspect of the environment has the most immediate influence on a child's development? Micro, meso, exo, or macro system? You can think back to the image with the bubbles. Microsystem. And according to neuroscientists, at what period of development are our brains static? During infancy, they aren't at all. Throughout adulthood, and during the aging period from the age of 50. A, B, C, or D? They aren't static during any period of development, constantly moving, constantly moving. Which of the following is most likely to view development in terms of stages rather than incremental changes? Learning theories, Piaget's cognitive development theory, information processing theory, or social learning theory, excuse me. A, B, C, or D? B, Piaget's cognitive development theory. And last one, in lifespan developmental theories, significant developmental changes are thought to be largely complete by age 18, 30, 50, or death. Significant developmental changes are thought to be largely complete by death. Right? Because you've gone through all these different things. And so, like I was saying, you're going to maybe go through all those different stages faster if you've got a prognosis of only a little bit left to live, right? So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I hope that this was helpful for you. I think I have the comments enabled. Feel free to leave them or shoot me an email if you have a question about something I've shared. I hope this was helpful to you, and have a great night. That's the end of chapter 1.